Okay, good morning, class. So, last lecture we have started the chapter that is antipsychotic agents. You can say antipsychotic drugs. Another name for this one is neuroleptic drugs or major tranquilizers. Okay, so these are the drugs which are useful for the treatment of psychosis. So, drugs which are useful against the treatment of psychosis, they are called as the antipsychotic agent. So, in case of psychosis, we can find different signs, symptoms. Okay, so one of which is the schizophrenia, that is the biological illness, then mania. Okay, so what happens in case of schizophrenia? It will produces the symptoms like paranoia, hallucination, phobia, delusion. So such symptoms can be observed, which can be observed in case of schizophrenia, as well as the mania, that is the increase the activity, suddenly increase in the activity of a person than the normal one. So that comes under the mania. Okay. So the main part of the antipsychotic agents. So in case of anti-Parkinson also we have discussed. What we have said, anti-Parkinson drugs can decrease the signs and symptoms or their intensity of that Parkinson, but it cannot completely cure the Parkinson. Similarly, the antipsychotic agents, they are also having the same kind of effect. That means they can decrease the intensity of psychosis effect, but they will not completely inhibit the psychosis, or they will not completely cure the psychosis. Okay, so they can generally decrease the intensity of the psychosis. Okay, that means they can decreases the intensity of hallucination as well as the delusion. Okay, so we have seen what we have seen, where the dopamine secretion takes place in our brain or in the CNS. So there are generally four sites where the dopamine secretion takes place. One is the mesolimbic part, second one is the mesocortical, third one is the nigrostriatal, and fourth one is the infundibular. So it is also called as tuburoinfundibular. Okay, infundibular we can say, or tubuloinfundibular. So these are the four sites where the secretion of this dopamine takes place, and it will affect the activity of that site. Okay, so in case of mesolimbic, if it is secreted at the mesolimbic, it will increases the activity, that is the hallucination, delusion, paranoia, or phobia. So such activities can be increased when it will secreted at the mesolimbic part of a brain. If it is secreted at the mesocortical, what it does, it decreases the social activity or the social behavior of a person. Okay, so the same dopamine, if it is secreted or it is present in the mesolimbic, it will increases the activity. Same dopamine, if it is present or secreted in the mesocortical, it will decreases the behavior or the social behavior. Similar in case of nigrostriatal, as we have already seen, they are generally related with the Parkinson. So if it is decreases the concentration of dopamine at the nigrostriatal part, it will produces the symptoms of Parkinson, that is a tremor cell. Okay, so instability cell, postural problems. So all these problems we can see if their secretion decreases in the nigrostriatal part. But if their secretion takes place, or the normal secretion or increase in the secretion takes place, so such symptoms can be minimized and it will produces the better psychomotor activity. So that is in the nigrostriatal. And finally, we have seen the infundibular or the tuburoinfundibular, where the secretion of dopamine, or if dopamine is present, it will inhibit the prolactin release. So these are the four sites in the brain, or you can say at the CNS, where the secretion of dopamine takes place, and it will produces the different activity. So what happens? The antipsychotic agents, they are mainly responsible. What they are do? Mainly responsible to decrease the concentration or to decrease the activity of dopamine. सो हे जे अँटीसायकोटिक एजंट्स आहेत ते काय करतात, तर डोपामाइन सिक्रिशन कमी करायचा, त्याची ऍक्टिव्हिटी आहे ती कमी करायचा प्रयत्न करतात. सो देर आर 5 डोपामाइन रिसेप्टर्स. कुठले कुठले आहेत? D1, D2, D3, D4 and D5. So these are the 5 dopamine receptors. So what happens? The dopamine, sorry, so dopamine which is secreted, they will generally bind to the dopamine 2 receptor and they will perform all these functions or the psychosis related problems. They are related with the dopamine 2 receptor. So the drugs which are given, they are T2 receptor blocker. So आपण जे antipsychotic drugs देणार आहे ते कुठले आहेत? ते डोपामाइन ब्लॉकर आहेत. ओके, अँटी डोपामाइनिक एजंट्स आहेत. ते डोपामाइनचं सिक्रेशन कमी करतात. दे आर अँटॅगोनिस्ट. Okay, so where they binds to the dopamine 2 receptor and they block the binding of dopamine to the dopamine 2 receptor. So all these activities or the psychotic effect which are seen in the psychotic person or the psychotic person, they can be minimized by using the D2 blocker or dopamine 2 blocker. Okay, so already we have seen there are two types of antipsychotic agents, generally typical antipsychotic agents and atypical antipsychotic agents. So typical antipsychotic agents, they are also called a first generation antipsychotic agents. Atypical agents, they are also called a second generation antipsychotic agents. So in this way we can classify the antipsychotic agent at the first generation and the second generation. So the typical which are present, what they do? They bind only to the D2 receptor, they block the D2 receptor. But when they block the D2 receptor, as we have seen, the dopamine having the 4 types of activity which is found in the brain or the CNS, that is at the mesolimbic, mesocortical, nigrostriatal and tuberoinfundibular. But when it binds to dopamine 2 receptor and block the drug, the dopamine 2 receptor, then what happens? In case of mesolimbic, it will decrease the hallucination, delusion, phobia, all these activities can be decreased or their intensity can be decreased. So it is useful for the patient. But in case of mesocortical, it will further decreases the social behavior, as well as in case of nigrostriatal, it will produces the problems which will produces the similar kind of symptoms which can found in the पार्किन्सन. सो पार्किन्सन मध्ये काय होतं? डोपामाइन कमी होतो. सिमिलर आपण जर डोपामाइन 2 ब्लॉक केलं तर काही प्रमाणात डोपामाइनची ऍक्टिव्हिटी ती कमी होणार. सो इट कॅन प्रोड्यूस द सिमिलर काइंड ऑफ इफेक्ट व्हॉट वी कॅन सी इन द पार्किन्सन कंडिशन्स. And finally in the tuberoinfundibular, so they will release the prolactin. So prolactin will be released, and when the prolactin will be released, it will produce the side effects which are the sexual dysfunction. Okay, such side effects which are responsible for the sexual activities, it will be produced when dopamine 2 receptor is blocked. So in case of typical antipsychotic agent, they only block to the D2 receptor. Hence some side effects can be seen in these typical agents. But in case of atypical agents, they are not only blocking the D2, they are also responsible to block the 5-HT, that is the serotonin. They are also not blocking, they are produces their activity on serotonin receptor also. So the side effects which are produces due to the only blocking to the D2 receptor, if these side effects can be overcome in case of atypical by having their activity on serotonin receptor. Are you getting my point? फक्त जर D2 receptor block झालं तर D2 receptor बरोबर बाकीचे जे साइड इफेक्ट्स आहेत ते दिसणार. पण ते जे साइड इफेक्ट्स बाकीचे दिसतात ते कशावर ओव्हरकम करू शकतो आपण? बाय गिव्हिंग द agents which are active on the serotonin receptor. So such agents, if we are giving, they act on serotonin receptor, and after activity on serotonin receptor, they can produce minimum side effects which are related with the typical antipsychotic agents. So atypical having less side effects as compared to the typical. So they come as second generation antipsychotic agents. So typical are the first generation, atypical they are called as the second generation antipsychotic agents. Then we have seen, okay, so these are the classification of antipsychotic drugs depending upon their activity. That is the first generation antipsychotic, and first generation antipsychotic which having the high potency, and the second generation which having the atypical antipsychotic agents. So this is the classification of antipsychotic agents. That is the typical and atypical antipsychotic agents. So here you can see the dopamine which is released, it can bind to the dopamine 2 receptor, they will perform their activity. But the drug which having the antipsychotic agents, what they do? They bind to these receptors. ते काय करतात? डोपामाइनच्या ऐवजी स्वतःच त्या रिसेप्टरला बाइंड होतात. त्यामुळे डोपामाइन आहे ते D2 रिसेप्टरला बाइंड होऊ शकत नाही. इन दिस वे वी कॅन ऑब्झर्व दी antipsychotic activity. Okay, here you can observe what happens with dopamine. As we have seen, dopamine is other neurotransmitter like dopamine also synthesis takes place. They comes under this synaptic gap. Then when they comes there, they can bind to the different receptor. So there are 5 dopamine receptors. Okay, some of them it will again undergo reuptake. Reuptake कोण करतं? Dopamine transporters. Okay, some of they will undergo the metabolic process. So in this way, the normal functioning of dopamine takes place. So drug which you are given, they block the D2 receptor. There is no further activity which are related with the D2 receptor. Then what is the dopamine hypothesis? So it is a hypothesis. Hypothesis means it is not the actual fact, or it is the hypothetical part. Okay, so what it tells, the schizophrenia or the symptoms which can observe in the schizophrenia like hallucination, delusion, uh, phobia. Okay, so all these signs and symptoms which are regarding with the schizophrenia, where they come from? They come from excess activity of dopamine in the mesolimbic and mesocortical pathway. So due to that hypothesis, the antipsychotic agents which are developed, these antipsychotic agents developed, they can block the dopamine receptor. And higher level of dopamine receptor measured in the brains of schizophrenia. Okay, so simulation of drug, they act through dopamine, can produce the schizophrenia-like behavior. Okay, that is the hypothesis. That is the, it is said that it is hypothetical part. Actually not proven, but it is the hypothetical that the schizophrenial symptoms or the schizophrenia is a result of excess secretion or the excess activity of dopamine in mesolimbic and mesocortical pathway. That's why the antipsychotic agents, they are developed. How they are developed? They are developed such a way that they can decrease the excess activity of dopamine. They can normalize the activity of dopamine. So that we have to block the dopamine to bind to their receptor. Neurotransmitter आपली ऍक्टिव्हिटी कधी दाखवतात? नुसतं सिंथेसाइज केले की ते आपली ऍक्टिव्हिटी दाखवत नाहीत. For after synthesis, they have to bind to the receptor. Then only they can show the activity. Okay, so dopamine, they binds to the receptor and they will show the activity. So the antipsychotic agents, they block the receptor so that dopamine cannot bind to the receptor D2 and it will not show its activity. So in this way they can decrease, what they can decrease? They can decrease the activity of dopamine and they can useful in the treatment of schizophrenia. So that is the hypothesis regarding the dopamine. Okay, so we have seen some basic information regarding the psychosis and the antipsychotic agents. Now we are moving to the next part, that is the actual classification of antipsychotic agents. Okay, so we can classify it by two ways. First one, depending upon their generation, that is the first generation and the second generation. So these are the first generation which having the low potency. So chlorpromazine, thyroidazine, these are the first generation antipsychotic agents having the low potency. And second one, in the first generation, that is the first generation with the high potency, that is the flufenazine, haloperidol, pimozide, thiothixin C, they having the high potency. And then second one, as we have discussed, second generation antipsychotic. So the first generation comes under the typical antipsychotic agents. Second generation they comes under the atypical antipsychotic agents with the less side effects as compared to the first generation. Okay, because first generation they act only on the D2 receptor, but the second generation they act on D2 receptor as well as they act on the serotonin or the 5-hydroxytryptophan receptor. So this is the classification depending upon their generation, or you can say this is the pharmacological classification. Now second type of classification is depending upon their structure, which structure they are present. So first one, that is the phenothiazine derivative. So the drugs or the antipsychotic agents which having the phenothiazine ring in their structure. So in that we have seen yesterday there are side chain. There are three types of side chain. One is depending upon aliphatic side chain. Second one is the piperidine. Third one is the piperazine. So this phenothiazine, that is the first part of the classification. They are again classified into three types. That is the aliphatic side chain, phenothiazine with the piperidine side chain, and phenothiazine with the piperazine side chain. Then second class is the butarphenol. So this classification is depending upon the structure. So the example is haloperidol, droperidol. So haloperidol is not there for your syllabus, but the droperidol is there for your syllabus. So in that you can write down the example in the butarphenol, that is the droperidol. So the phenothiazine, they are classified into three types: alkyl side chain, piperazine side chain, and piperidine side chain. Second one, butarphenol, they are having the droperidol as the example. Third one, atypical antipsychotic, that is the risperidone as the example, and with other heterocyclic structure other than phenothiazine and butarphenol. They are the pimozide, laxopine, clozapine, sulpride. So these are the examples which comes under the antipsychotic agent which has other. And one is the thioxanthin derivative. So the chlorprothoxine, it is the example of drug which is the antipsychotic with the thioxanthin derivative. So this is the classification of the antipsychotic agent depending upon the structure or the nucleus which is present in their structure. So the first one, that is the phenothiazine. The phenothiazine again classified into three types, that is the aliphatic side chain with piperidine side chain with piperazine side chain. Again the butarphenol, second one is butarphenol, it is classified into the droperidol. Third one is the atypical antipsychotic, that is the risperidone, or you can say other antipsychotic, in that the example is risperidone. Then antipsychotic agents with other heterocycle like pimozide, loxapine, clozapine, sulpride. So these are the examples comes to this. And the last one, that is the antipsychotic agent with the thioxanthin nucleus, that is the chlorprothoxine. So these are the classification along with the examples of antipsychotic agents. So they are classified one by the pharmacological classification, that is the typical, atypical, or first generation, second generation. This is the second one depending upon the structural or the nucleus which is present in their structure. That is the phenothiazine, butyphenol, atypical or other antipsychotic with other heterocycles, and last one thioxanthin derivatives. We will start with the first one, that is the phenothiazine derivatives. So what is the mechanism of action of phenothiazine derivatives? So all phenothiazines, they may be the alkyl side chain, piperidine side chain, piperazine side chain, they have the potency to block the dopamine, that is the D2 receptor. So generally in the limbic and mesocortical agents, which is responsible for the antipsychotic activity. So they block the D2 receptor. So when the blockade of D2 receptor takes place, dopamine will not bind to the D2 receptor, and if it will not bind to the D2 receptor, it will not show the activity which are related with the D2 receptor, that is the schizophrenia like activities. So due to that, it is useful for the treatment of schizophrenia. That means it is responsible for the antipsychotic agents. So when dopamine binds to the D2 receptor, it will show the activity similar to the schizophrenia. But when the receptor is blocked, these schizophrenia-like activities can be inhibited. Okay, so this is the structure of phenothiazine ring. This is the phenol group. Thiazine, thia means sulfur, aza means nitrogen. So this is called as phenothiazine. So the thia means sulfur, aza means nitrogen, and finally the ine. This is a phenothiazine. That is the six-member ring is called as the ine. So it is called as together this ring system. It's called as phenothiazine ring system. Okay, so that is the numbering. We have to start the number from this one. The sulfur must get the number 5. It should not be from this one, this two, this three, and 5 to nitrogen. This is the wrong one. So the what is the correct? So sulfur has to give the number 5. For that, you have to start the number from anti-clockwise instead of the clockwise. Then what are the important position? Then the second position is important as we are discussing in the class. That is at the second position there must be presence of electron withdrawing group. So if the electron withdrawing group is present at the second position, it will maintain the proper resonating structure. So it will better for the activity. So generally electron withdrawing group in that chloro group is present or trifluoromethane group is present. So the structure with having more electronegativity, so CF3 has more electronegativity than the chlorine. The compounds, that is the antipsychotic agents, phenothiazine, which having the CF3 in their ring structure, it is more potent as compared to the compound having the Cl in their ring structure, because the electronegativity of CF3 is more, that is the trifluoromethane, than the chlorine. Okay, so here you can find out potential increases with the electronegativity. So the trifluoropromazine, they are having the CF3, chlorpromazine, they are having the Cl. So chlorpromazine is less potent or less active as compared to the trifluoropromazine, as it consists of CF3, which is the more electronegative group. Then generally classification of this phenothiazine is divided into three types, or the phenothiazine derivatives, they are divided into three types with respect to the side chain which is present. So the if alkyl side chain is present, it is called as alkyl phenothiazine. If the piperidine ring is present at this position, it is called as piperidine phenothiazine. If piperazine ring is present, it is called as piperazine phenothiazine. So this way the classification of the phenothiazine takes place. Okay, so with alkyl side chain there are two examples, chlorpromazine and triflupromazine. So here you can observe the alkyl side chain. This is the alkyl part. Okay, so the alkyl side chain, if chlorine is present, chlorpromazine. If trifluorocarbon is methane is present, triflupromazine. The second one, the phenothiazine ring with the piperidine side chain. So this is the piperidine group, that is the piperidine group. So if such group is present and at the second position SCH3 is present, example is thioridazine. So the classification of phenothiazine, first one with alkyl side chain, second one is the piperidine side chain, and third one is the piperazine side chain. That is this is the piperazine ring. And the example, if the piperazine ring structure is present along with the chlorine at the second position, the example is prochlorperazine. And if CF3 is present, trifluoperazine. Because piperazine, it is also called as the perazine. You can observe this is the perazine. So this is the prochlorperazine and trifluoperazine. So these are the classification of phenothiazine antipsychotic agent. The first one with alkyl side chain, so chlorpromazine, triflupromazine. Second one is the piperidine ring, that is the thioridazine. Third one with the piperazine ring, that is the prochlorperazine and trifluperazine. Again, per phenazine, if this group is different, this is the fluphenazine. We draw the structure of these examples. Per phenazine and fluphenazine. Okay, draw the structure. These are the piperazine side chain. So these are the three classes of phenothiazine, that is the alkyl side chain, piperazine side chain, and the piperidine side chain. Okay. Now what is the effect? What is the requirement of the side chain? Side chain किती असली पाहिजे? So in the tricyclic antidepressant, we have seen the distance between the cyclic part which attach to the side chain and the nitrogen. So this is the and this nitrogen. So distance between these two must be the with three carbon atoms. And it is CH2, CH2, CH2. So here you can find in case of piperazine also the distance between these and these amine group having the three carbons. So in case of chlorpromazine is also they having the three carbons. Why the three carbons are required? So three carbons are required to bring the amine group nearer to the chlorine. So हा chlorine group आणि हा amine group हे जवळ आणण्यासाठी त्याच्यामध्ये हायड्रोजन बॉन्ड फॉर्म करण्यासाठी आपल्याला तीन अल्किल ग्रुपची गरज असते. So there must be presence of 3CH2. Why it is required? So that if 3CH2 are present, they come close together, they form the hydrogen bond, they will show the better activity. Okay, so effective size is 3 carbons. Now we will move to the next and important part. What is the SAR? Or the structure activity relationship of phenothiazine. Okay, so the first one regarding the ring substitution or with regarding the ring. At the second position, as we have discussed, there must be presence of electron withdrawing group. If electron withdrawing group is present, it will show the better activity as compared to electron donating group because it maintains the resonating power if electron withdrawing group is present. And when this is maintained resonant, it will show the better activity. And among the electron withdrawing group, which having the more electronegativity, it having the more activity. So we have seen that is the CF3 having more electronegativity as compared to Cl. So this CF3 having the more activity or it is more potent as compared to the compound having the halogen. Okay, so electron withdrawing group on phenyl ring increases the antipsychotic activity except C1 पोझिशन. C1 पोझिशनला इलेक्ट्रॉन विड्रॉइंग ग्रुप असता कामा नये. बाकीच्या कुठल्याही पोझिशनला 2, 3, 4 ला जर असेल इट शोज अ बेटर ऍक्टिव्हिटी. आणि सगळ्यात जास्त ऍक्टिव्हिटी किती दाखवतं इफ इलेक्ट्रॉन विड्रॉइंग ग्रुप इज प्रेझेंट at the second position. So the order of potency, if 2 having more activity or the most activity as compared to the 3, 4 and the 1. If 1 is present, it shows the very less activity if the electron withdrawing group is present at this position. So Cl किंवा CF3 इथं पाहिजे, तो जर इथं असेल फर्स्ट पोझिशनला इट विल शो दी लेस ऍक्टिव्हिटी और डिक्रीज इन द ऍक्टिव्हिटी. The second one, substitution on C1 position decreases the antipsychotic agents because it interferes with the bending of side chain. जर फर्स्ट पोझिशनला जर आपण एखादं सबस्टिट्यूशन केलं तर त्याची ऍक्टिव्हिटी आहे ती कमी होते. आता आपण बघितलेलं आहे 3 अल्किल चेन मध्ये 3 कार्बन कशासाठी लागतात त्या कार्बन मध्ये आणि इथल्या जो Cl आहे ह्याच्यामध्ये हायड्रोजन बॉन्ड तयार करण्यासाठी. सो दॅट स्ट्रक्चर विच बाइंड्स टू द रिसेप्टर दॅट कॅन बी disturbed or that can be disturbed when we have any substitution at one position. So one position should not be substituted. The first position must be present freely. There must be no any substitution at the first position. And as we have seen, increase the electron withdrawing power, that is the more electronegative atom, its activity or its potency increases. Then this position, that is the sulfur, if it is converted into the sulfoxide, so इथं ऑक्सिडेशन करून इथं डबल बॉन्ड O केलं किंवा सल्फोन ह्यामध्ये जर कन्वर्जन केलं it will decreases the activity. So there must be presence of a ring sulfur. So if conversion of ring sulfur into sulfoxide or sulfone, it will decreases the activity. So there must be presence of a ring sulfur instead of sulfoxide or the sulfur. So if we have converted the sulfur into the oxidized state, that is the sulfoxide or the sulfone, it will decreases the activity. Multiple substitution on ring system, it will decreases the activity. Second position ला substitution असेल, it will show the better activity. पण second position ला पण आहे, third position ला पण आहे, fourth position ला पण आहे. असे जर मल्टिपल आपण जर substitution केलं, इथं पण substitution केलं, इथं पण केलं, इथं पण केलं. If we are substituting the multiple side of a ring, it will decreases the activity. So there must be presence of a single substitution at the second position, which is the electron withdrawing for the better activity. So there must be presence of a single substitution instead of the multi substitution. Okay. Now next one, regarding the alkyl side chain. So पहिला आपण बघितलं regarding the nucleus. Now second part, or the second part of SAR regarding the alkyl side chain. Alkyl side chain कशी असेल? So as we have seen, it must having the 3 carbons. So if it increases or decreases, 3 चं 4 केलं, 5 केलं, किंवा 3 चं 2 केलं, 1 केलं, जर डिक्रीज केलं तर काय होतं? कार्बन डिक्रीजेस दी त्याची ऍक्टिव्हिटी आहे ती डिक्रीज होते. If the molecule having the 2 carbons in their side chain, तर ड्रग हा जास्त अँटीहिस्टॅमिनिक ऍक्टिव्हिटी दाखवतो. इथं 3 आहेत, 3च्या ऐवजी फक्त अल्फा बीटा हा कार्बन आणि हा कार्बन असेल, डायरेक्टली नायट्रोजन असेल. Its structure similar to the histamine, so it will bind to the histamine receptor, it will block the histamine receptor. Hence, if the molecule having the 2 carbon side chain, they becomes the histamine antagonist or antihistaminic agents. Then third one, if any substitution is made ऑन बीटा कार्बन, ह्या मधल्या कार्बनवर सबस्टिट्यूशन केलं, आपण अँटीडिप्रेसंट मध्ये पण बघितलेलं आहे. जर सबस्टिट्यूशन केलं तर शक्यतो ऍक्टिव्हिटी चेंज कमी किंवा जास्त होत नाही. सो डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द अदर सबस्टिट्यूशन इट विल not affect the activity. But in case of this one, if at the beta substitution or at the beta position, if there is any substitution is present, any branching is present, so it may decrease or increase the activity. But if it is present at the alpha position, then the activity of compound will decrease. So at the beta position is there, it will decrease or increases the activity. Then on the gamma position, any substitution on gamma position, so this is the gamma position, it will increases the anticholinergic activity and decreases the anti-dopaminergic activity. So साइड चेन मध्ये 2च कार्बन असेल, अँटीहिस्टॅमिनिक ऍक्टिव्हिटी मिळणार. साइड चेन मधल्या गॅमाला जो सबस्टिट्यूशन असेल, अँटीकोलिनर्जिक ऍक्टिव्हिटी मिळणार. सो साइड चेन मस्ट बी द 3 कार्बन atoms as well as it should be unsubstituted for the better or for the optimum activity. So that is the alkyl side chain. Now next part, that is the, we have seen the nucleus, that is this part, then side chain. Now we are moving to the next part, that is the this one, tertiary amine. So if tertiary amine group is present or the terminal amine is in the tertiary form, it shows better activity as compared to secondary or primary. Then R1 and R2 must be the methyl group. R1 आणि R2 हे मिथाइल ग्रुप असले पाहिजे. मिथाइलच्या जागी जर इथाइल प्रोपाइल अटॅच केले तर त्याची ऍक्टिव्हिटी डिक्रीज होते. त्यानंतर क्वाटर्नरी अमाइन ग्रुप, अजून एक CH3 ग्रुप ऍड केला तर स्ट्रक्चर काय होतं, क्वाटर्नरी अमाइन ग्रुप. जर क्वाटर्नरी अमाइन ग्रुप जर असेल, एक CH3 अजून ऍड केला तर मॉलिक्यूल हा इनएक्टिव्ह होतो. And mainly 3 types of substitution are possible having D2 binding or blocking activity. First one aliphatic side chain, second one piperazine, third one piperidine. त्यापैकी जर piperazine असेल, it having better activity as compared to aliphatic as compared to piperidine. म्हणजे तिथे जर piperazine रिंग असेल तर ती ऍक्टिव्हिटी जास्त दाखवणार as compared to the aliphatic, as compared to the piperidine. So these are the points which comes under the SAR. Okay, महत्वाचे पॉइंट काय? Okay, I will repeat once again the important parts. सेकंड पोझिशनला इलेक्ट्रॉन मिटवाई ग्रुप पाहिजे. तिथं इलेक्ट्रॉन डोनेटिंग असेल तर ऍक्टिव्हिटी डिक्रीज होणार. त्यानंतर फर्स्ट पोझिशनला कुठलेही सबस्टिट्यूशन असेल, ऍक्टिव्हिटी डिक्रीज होणार. त्यानंतर मल्टी सबस्टिट्यूशन असेल, ऍक्टिव्हिटी डिक्रीज होणार. त्यानंतर हा सल्फर आहे तो सल्फरच असला पाहिजे. इट शुड नॉट बी सल्फॉन और सल्फॉक्साइड लाइक ग्रुप. सो दीज आर these one regarding the ring substitutions. Then in case of side chain, there must be a carbon having the 3 numbers, CH2, CH2 and CH2. The दोनच असेल, it becomes more antihistaminic activity. 3 पेक्षा जास्त असेल तर ऍक्टिव्हिटी डिक्रीज होते. So there must be presence of 3. त्यामध्ये जर तुम्ही सबस्टिट्यूशन केलं तिघांच्या मध्ये, अल्फाला सबस्टिट्यूशन केलं ऍक्टिव्हिटी डिक्रीज होणार, बीटाला सबस्टिट्यूशन केलं ऍक्टिव्हिटी डिक्रीज होईल किंवा वाढेल. पण जर गॅमाला सबस्टिट्यूशन केलं तर आपल्याला अँटीकोलिनर्जिक ऍक्टिव्हिटी आहे ती मिळणार आहे इन्स्टेड ऑफ अँटी डोपामिन ऍक्टिव्हिटी. अँटी डोपामिन ऍक्टिव्हिटी कमी होणार, अँटीकोलिनर्जिक ऍक्टिव्हिटी आहे ती वाढणार. आणि जर दोनच कार्बन असतील तर अँटी हिस्टॅमिनिक ऍक्टिव्हिटी आपल्याला मिळणार आहे. Now last part, that is this part. हा जर quaternary असेल, if this part is quaternary, it will drug becomes inactive. टर्शरी अमाइन असेल तर ऍक्टिव्हिटी जास्त मिळणार. मिथाइल मिथाइल असेल तर प्रॉपर ऍक्टिव्हिटी मिळणार. जर मिथाइल पेक्षा जास्त मोठा ग्रुप असेल, इथाइल प्रोपाइल, तर ऍक्टिव्हिटी आहे ती डिक्रीज होणार. आणि सगळे जे सबस्टिट्यूशन आहेत त्यामध्ये जर पायप्राझिन रिंग असेल तर ते ड्रग सगळ्यात जास्त ऍक्टिव्हिटी दाखवतात ऍज कम्पेअर टू अल्किल साइडचे, ऍज कम्पेअर टू पायप्राडिन. ज्या स्ट्रक्चरमध्ये पायप्राडिन रिंग आहे ती सगळ्यात कमी ऍक्टिव्हिटी दाखवत आहे. ज्याच्यामध्ये पायप्राझिन आहे, इट विल शो दी मोर ऍक्टिव्हिटी ऍज कम्पेअर टू द ॲलिफॅटिक, ऍज कम्पेअर टू पायप्राडिन. Now we will move to the examples of phenothiazine derivatives. So the promazine is the example. So promazine मध्ये क्लोरीन ग्रुप हा सेकंड पोझिशनला नसतो. ओके, सो दॅट इज इट्स नेम, NN डायमिथाइल 3-phenothiazine 10-ईल प्रोपेन 1 अमाइन हायड्रोक्लोराइड. Hydrochloride, that is the promazine hydrochloride. So it is present in the hydrochloric salt. It is the derivative of phenothiazine in having antipsychotic activity as well as the anti-emetic activity. So this block postsynaptic D1 as well as the D2 receptor in mesolimbic and medullary chemoreceptor trigger zone. Hence, it decreases the stimulation of omitting center in the brain, as well as the decreases the psychotic effect like hallucination and delusion. But it also blocks the alpha receptor and it will show strong anticholinergic activity. So what it does, it decreases the stimulation of omitting center. So ओमिटिंग कमी करायचं असेल तर प्रोमाझिन ड्रग दिलं जातं. ज्यांना उलट्या होत असेल किंवा उलट्यांचा प्रॉब्लेम होत असेल, फॉर देम द प्रोमाझिन ड्रग इज प्रिस्क्राइब. देन क्लोप्रोमाझिन, सीएल नसेल, हा सीएल जर नसेल तर प्रोमाझिन, सीएल जर असेल तर क्लोरप्रोमाझिन. सो दॅट इज द IUPAC nomenclature for the chlorpromazine. Just go through it. So it having similar effect. It is used for the short-term treatment of disturbed behavior and anti-emetic drug. Currently, this drug is not approved for use in United States. So chlorpromazine hydrochloride is again the hydrochloric salt. It having the anti-emetic activity as well as the antipsychotic activity. Okay, remaining as it is like promazine, it block the trigger zone, chemical trigger zone in brain to produce the anti-emetic activity. It decreases the psychotic symptoms such as the hallucination symptom, delusion symptoms. Some symptoms can be decreased due to the chlorpromazine. The next drug, that is the triflupromazine. Triflupromazine is CF3 group. Cl असेल तर chlorpromazine, CF3 असेल तर triflupromazine. This is the IUPAC nomenclature for the triflupromazine. Okay, so it is the member of phenothiazine that having the hydrogen phenothiazine having the trifluoromethyl instead of the chlorine. It is better D2 receptor antagonist as well as it having the anti-emetic drug. It is the first generation antipsychotic agent. Okay, so mostly the drug are promazine, chlorpromazine, triflupromazine. These drugs they are generally used as the anti-emetic drug also. Vomiting कमी करण्यासाठी किंवा vomiting होऊ नये यासाठी ह्या प्रकारचे ड्रग आहेत ते दिले जातात along with the antipsychotic agents. Next one, flufenazine. It is generally sold under the names of prolixin. It is also the antipsychotic use. It is used in the treatment of psychosis such as schizophrenia. Okay, so it is equal effectiveness to low potency antipsychotic like chlorpromazine. It is given by mouth injection into the muscles just under the skin. Then thioridazine, this is the structure. So it is also the hydrochloric salt. It binds to the dopamine receptor, that is the D2 receptor. It decreases the psychotic effects such as hallucination, delusion. But addition to that, it will bind to the serotonin receptor, resulting in decrease the serotonin activity. Serotoninची activity सुद्धा ते decrease करतात. Trifluparazine, this is the structure. Please write down the structure. It is the piperazine. It having the more activity as compared to other drugs. Similar anti-emetic, it decreases the antipsychotic effect like delusion, hallucination. They bind to the adrenergic receptor, which results into the anxiolytic effect. Okay, so these are the examples of the drugs which comes under the antipsychotic which having the phenothiazine ring system. So the phenothiazine they are classified into three types: alkyl side chain, piperidine side chain, piperazine side chain. त्यापैकी जे piperazine side chain असलेले जे ड्रग आहेत, it is more active as compared to the alkyl side chain and सगळ्यात कमी activity कुणाची असते which having the piperidine ring structure. So in this way the classification takes place. So they all are showing the antipsychotic activity, but mainly they are given as the anti-emetic drug. They act on the chemical trigger zone which is responsible for the vomiting. So their vomiting sensation decreases, so it will decreases the vomiting. Hence they are also act as the anti-emetic drugs. So in the exam, please note that these drugs which comes under the phenothiazine derivatives along with the antipsychotic agents, they are also act as the anti-emetic agents. Promazine असेल, chlorpromazine असेल, trifluparazine असेल, thioridazine असेल. So these drugs they are mainly responsible for the activity on the chemical trigger zone, and they will decrease the sensation, and they will responsible for the anti-vomiting effect, that is the anti-emetic drug. Okay, so this is about the drugs which comes under the phenothiazine derivatives. Okay, so next type of these haloperidol or the butorphanol that we will see in the next lecture.